This was me at 25% body fat. I was insecure, had a terrible diet and got exhausted from walking the stairs. This is me at 15% body fat. I'm way more confident, have more energy and I get more attention from people around me. In this video I'm going to talk about the 5 shifts that I made to go from this to this, so you can get similar results to me but in way less time. Number 1, have filling meals rather than snacking. One of the biggest reasons why people stay fat, and I used to be the same as well back in the day, is because we snack just so much more than we actually should. You know, we have a cookie over here, we have a bag of chips over there, we have some sandwiches, and then we have a chocolate bar afterwards. You know, constantly eating throughout the day, these small things over and over. This was something that kept me stuck for months and months at a time. You know, barely making any progress to my body, and you're probably guilty of doing this as well. It wasn't until I started to focus on, you know, eating less times throughout the day but having more filling meals once I actually ate, that completely changed everything for me. You know, because back in the day, right, I could easily have like 5, 6, 7 meals spaced throughout the day, but they were just smaller ones, so I didn't even get full once I had them. And that was a big reason why I constantly was overeating. Once I made the shift, you know, to eating 3 bigger meals throughout the day, instead of having these 5, 6, 7, you know, smaller meals that didn't even keep me full anyway, that's when I started to see progress to my body, you know, just like in this picture right here. And you know, when I say eating 3 bigger meals, right, I obviously don't mean that you can have junk food or whatever you like. Don't be stupid there, you know what I'm talking about. You know, when I talk about food, I only mean having whole foods. What this basically means is just, you know, foods with no weird ingredients in them. You know, when you check the ingredients label, it doesn't say like 50 different ingredients that you can't even pronounce, you know, these weird chemicals or whatever you can think of. Obviously, you can just look at that ingredients table and you can just know for yourself that that stuff is not good for you. So you shouldn't even be eating it in the first place. What I personally did when it comes to food, to not have it boring, right, is just to rotate between different type of ingredients. You know, chicken, ground beef or fish. And then I combine that with either rice or potatoes. Now, if you feel like you want my personal help to guide you step by step along the way to lose fat and build muscle at the same time, just like me in this picture right here, then click the first link in the description right now. You know, to get even more volume out of the food that I was eating, right, I would usually have some kind of vegetable next to it, either broccoli, asparagus, or whatever you enjoy having. You know, I know what you're thinking right now. This guy is telling me that I should be eating chicken, broccoli and rice every single day. Like, I'm not even trying to be a bodybuilder, so why should I be eating this? Well, here's the truth. When I say that you should be eating these foods, I don't mean that you have to eat them in the blandest way possible. You can use them for so many different recipes that are tasty, they're easy to make, and they're actually good for you. You know, you don't have to eat this boring ass chicken breast with no seasoning and, you know, the broccoli that tastes like nothing and rice that's just like tasting like water. Don't be stupid. You can use so many seasonings to make it actually enjoyable. You know, just a quick search on YouTube and you can find hundreds, and I mean hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of recipes using these same ingredients over and over and over. You just have to stop being lazy and put in like the smallest of effort, and you can make this whole thing way more sustainable by actually eating foods that you enjoy eating. Here's the thing, right? Most of us, and this was me included, we already know that we should be eating better and, you know, improving our eating habits. But sometimes we just have to be reminded, maybe 1 time, 2, 3, 4, 5 times before we actually do something about it. So this is my reminder to you. Just don't be lazy. Do some basic research and I promise you that it will be so much easier to actually get results. Number 2, focus on building more muscle. You know, way too many people, and this was me included, we put so much emphasis on doing cardio to lose fat. You know, we're told that on a daily basis over and over and over, do this daily run, do this high intensity cardio. And you know, we just get into this mindset of thinking that cardio is the only way to lose fat. Now sure, I'm not saying, you know, that these exercises won't help you, you know, to increase your endurance and make you some progress to your body. But it doesn't have to be that intense whatsoever. What I recommend you to do, and got me the best progress, is by focusing on building more muscle instead of, doing crazy amounts of cardio. To start doing more resistance training. And this can be whatever you enjoy doing, body weight exercises, weightlifting in the gym, and the list goes on. For me personally, right, I enjoy going to the gym. Now, why I think it's important to build more muscle rather than increase the cardio is because, number one, right, when you get more muscle on your frame, you look better and you also feel more confident. But the most important part is that you increase your metabolism. Your metabolism is basically your body's way of, breaking down the food that you eat and turn it into energy. When we increase our metabolism, by building more muscle, in return, it helps us to burn more fat. When we have more muscle on the frame, our body needs more energy to sustain us. And when we don't give it more energy in the form of food, it starts to use the fat on our body instead as the main energy source. Now, as of exercising itself, I personally go to the gym 5 days a week. However, you don't need that amount whatsoever to actually get results. Why I personally go 5 days a week is simply just because I enjoy doing it and nothing more complicated than that. What I recommend you to start with is 3 days a week. If you're more of a beginner, then don't think too much about the workout routine, but rather that you just focus on getting into the habit of showing up. Remember this, you can have the greatest workout routine in the entire world, but if you can't show up to the gym consistently to even begin with, then it doesn't matter what you do, you won't make any progress. To help you along the way, I'll include a 3-day workout routine on the screen right now that you can copy to get started. Number 3, don't get too fixated on the scale. This right here is something I struggled with for a long period of time. I was eating better and I was working out, but some days I was gaining weight instead of losing it. And this made me so discouraged to actually keep going. Now, this left me so frustrated to the point where I thought to myself, right, like, why am I even doing this in the first place? And because of these bad thoughts, I started having the foods that I shouldn't be having in the first place. Now, why I'm telling you this is because maybe you're in the same situation just like I was in. You're eating better and you're working out, but the weight on the scale is not moving like you want it to. There are so many reasons why this is happening. And it's not something that you should be discouraged about. If you ate really close to bed, then it can affect the weight. If you had more liquids than usual, then that can also be a reason, and the list goes on. It was once I started to track my progress besides just the weight on the scale that my mental health became way better. You should still be tracking your weight because it's an easy thing to do and it's a good metric to follow, but that's not the only way to do it. Tracking the way that you look and your lifts in the gym is also a great indicator of you actually making progress. Maybe you're staying the same weight, but you're looking better and you're getting stronger, then the number doesn't really matter. What I personally did was that I started taking pictures of myself once a week, not only, so that I had something to look back on when I got in better shape, but also to look at for motivation when the scale wasn't moving. I could look at the pictures and see myself actually changing even though the scale was the same. Be honest with yourself. You don't really care about the number on the scale, right? But more so that you look good and that you feel good. So the number itself is almost irrelevant. It's just a psychological thing. Because I don't know about you, but for me personally, right, I would rather weigh 100 kg and look good and feel good instead of weighing like 60 kg where I feel unhealthy and don't like the way that I look. So what I'm trying to say is don't put that much pressure on just losing the weight on the scale, but more so, if you're doing better in the gym, you're getting stronger and your body starts to look better when you take pictures, but the weight is staying the same, then just know to yourself you're doing the right things even though the weight is not moving. Number 4, be careful with liquid calories. This is one of the most common traps that people fall into, and this was me as well. We completely underestimate the amount of liquid calories that we have on a day-to-day basis. Back in the day, right, when I was about 25% body fat, I was starting to eat better and I was exercising, but for weeks and weeks and weeks, my body stayed the same and the weight stayed the same on the scale as well. I remember thinking to myself like, I'm doing the right things, but I'm not seeing any progress. Why is this? The reason why was standing right in front of me. I was having way too many liquid calories on a day-to-day basis. At that point in my life, I was really addicted to soda, right? Whenever I was drinking something, it was pretty much only soda or, some kind of sugary drink. I barely had any water whatsoever. Now, what people don't realize, and I didn't as well at the time, is that the liquid calories you have, they add up so much faster than you think. On a regular day, I could easily have like 5 or 6 cans of Coke. And that in itself is like having one extra meal every single day. Now, a more common problem that people face, right, is drinking coffee. They go to Starbucks or these different coffee shops and they have like coffees with milk, sugar, whipped cream, and different syrups and whatever you can think of. And they have these several times a day. This is no different whatsoever to having several sodas every single day. The calories in these things are crazy compared to, just drinking black coffee. The solution that I found that helped me with this is just to go for the sugar-free alternatives. Or if you like to have coffee, then just go for a low-calorie option instead, so you still get the caffeine benefits. I really like soda, but if I wanted to make progress to my body, I had to change something up. Because if I kept drinking those 5-6 cans of regular Coke every single day, I wouldn't make any progress. So what I did, I went for the sugar-free versions, but I could still have the same amount of cans, without the extra calories. And by doing it like this, I was actually making progress without having to really restrict myself. What I'm trying to say is find better alternatives without having to remove the drink completely. And, doing a small thing like this, trust me when I say this, on a day-to-day basis, it makes a massive difference in the amount of calories that you have. Number 5, go for consistency, not perfection. This is something that gets overlooked by people time and time again, and this was me included. You think to yourself when you first want to get in shape, that you have to do every single thing perfect, 100% to actually make progress. But that is far from the truth. I had the mindset that if I couldn't work out 5 days a week and, eat healthy straight away and do that consistently, then I was a complete failure. But that is just being unrealistic, especially if you have no prior experience whatsoever. The most important thing when it comes to fitness and getting in shape in general is that you're consistent, but over a longer period of time. If you do everything perfect, but you can only keep it consistent for like 2 or 3 weeks, trust me when I say this, you're just wasting your time. The better approach will always be, and I mean always, is to ease yourself into it. I want you to have the mindset that just like I have right now, that fitness should be something with longevity. You don't feel the need to rush the process because you try and incorporate fitness into your life for the rest of your life. When you start approaching it with this longevity mindset, just trust me when I say this and learn from my mistakes. It will be so much easier to actually stay consistent and get the progress that you want, by slowly making it more difficult for yourself rather than going from 0 to 100 and not being able to do it consistent. Consistency will always be king. Now, if you want to lose over 30 pounds of fat, especially belly fat, then click and watch this video next where I tell you exactly how I did it.